Student athletes are back on the field throughout the Mid-Ohio Valley. Our Chase Campbell joins us live in the studio to discuss how they can practice safely in the heat. Chase?
Thank you, Phyllis. As student athletes return to the practice field, high school coaches and athletic trainers in the Mid-Ohio Valley say they take extra precautions to keep student athletes safe in the summer heat. I talked with a local athletic trainer and coach about the warning signs of heat illness and what's being done to prevent it.
Back to School Real Life Ready, helpful answers for busy families, sponsored by Holt Homes and Overhead Door of the Mid-Ohio Valley.
Every summer, student athletes head back to the practice field, and with rising temperatures, athletic trainers say heat illness is one of the biggest dangers they watch for.
We tell coaches and parents and athletes, watch out for, getting a headache, dizziness, heavy sweating to the point like you're completely soaking through layers of clothes. And then, if we start to get to your loss of consciousness, fainting, stopping sweating, that's always an emergency sign that you're going towards heat stroke.
Amanda Moore, a WVU medicine athletic trainer assigned to Parkersburg South High School, says those symptoms can escalate quickly, and there isn't much time to react once an athlete starts showing signs of heat exhaustion.
There really isn't a large window, and it depends on the person, but when they start exhibiting those heat exhaustion symptoms, we need to get them inside or get them in the shade, put them in an ice bath, get cold ice towels on, ice packs, and get them drinking water.
Moore says the West Virginia Secondary Schools Activities Commission requires teams to monitor a wet bulb globe thermometer at every practice. As the reading climbs into orange, red, and eventually black zones, practices are shortened, protective gear comes off, and in the most extreme conditions, teams move indoors or reschedule entirely. Parkersburg South head football coach Larry Thompson says Moore makes it easy to make those calls.
My coaches, Miss Moore, trainer, she does an amazing job of staying ahead of the heat, making sure that we're not out here when we're not supposed to be. Helmets come off, shoulder pads come off.
Thompson says his team keeps a cooler stocked with electrolytes and ice-cold towels at every practice, and he tries to get players in the mindset of taking hydration seriously well before the season starts.
You want to be vigilant of those things, right? And you just want to be aware of that. Just knowing and recognizing the signs and just being ahead of it. But on the other end of that, knowing those things, preparing our kids as much as possible in the off season and the regular season to get acclimated to the sun and to this heat by drinking constant fluids, water, replenishing electrolytes.
Moore says her staff tracks football players' weight day to day during practices to flag dehydration before it becomes dangerous. And she says preparation for the heat can't start the day before the first practice.
It's not just the day before. They need to be preparing all summer. They need to start drinking larger amounts of water leading up to practices. They need to be starting to get out in the heat instead of just sitting on the couch all summer.
Moore says thanks to having athletic trainers on site at area high schools, most heat-related cases are caught before they become emergencies. In Parkersburg, Chase Campbell, WTAP News. Athletic trainers may be able to prevent emergencies, but White emphasizes that the responsibility doesn't stop with them. Parents and athletes themselves need to watch for the warning signs too, especially as the region deals with increasingly hot and humid summers. That's all I have for now. Thanks, Phyllis. Back to you.
Chase Campbell.